Welcome to Blockchain Security Series, the podcast where the future of Web3 security unfolds. Presented by pablito.eth.
Hello and welcome. I am Pablo Sabbatella, your guide through the intricate and evolving world of blockchain security. Each episode we dive deep into the heart of Web3, bringing you face-to-face with the pioneers and key players shaping the blockchain security ecosystem. Hello everyone and welcome to the Blockchain Security Series podcast. This is our episode number 10 and today we have a very special guest, Adrian Ludwig, Chief Information Security Office at Tools for Humanity. So how are you, Adrian? Welcome.
I am doing really well. It's good to see you again, Pablo.
Yeah, we saw each other some weeks ago here in Buenos Aires when you were with the Tools for Humanity team. We had a nice dinner.
Yeah, it was really great to be down there.
So thanks for your time. So to start, I would like to know a bit about your background and your journey, right? So could you tell us a bit about how you got into cybersecurity? How was your journey leading up to be a CISO as Tools for Humanity?
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. I'm older than cybersecurity, so I joined security when it didn't have that name yet. The late 1990s. That's probably older than some of your listeners as well. We were just beginning to understand the implications of having home computers connected to the internet. I was working with the government trying to figure out how to make sure that users could be protected and services could be protected. I spent a lot of time there. Moved on to spend several years on the Android security team. When I joined the team, we had just a couple million users. By the time I left, we had over 2 billion users available around the world. Just an amazing opportunity for me to take what had been previously very expensive. Security has always been something that's an add-on that costs money and that was only available to enterprises. And so making that available to everybody in the world was something that was really exciting for me. I've spent several years at Nest, which is a IoT, Internet of Things provider, makes thermostats and home automation, and is part of the Alphabet family of companies. And then also headed up the security team for Atlassian for several years. So just really excited to build teams and help solve hard problems in security. When I started talking with Alex and Sandro and some of the Tools for Humanity people about it almost a year ago, they were describing the challenges of trying to really build something for the whole world to make it a better place, to prepare humanity for sort of the impending and accelerating implications of having AI online. And it's just such an awesome problem and such an exciting opportunity to have security be a core of what it is that the company is building that it's basically impossible for me to not say yes and join the team. So it's been an awesome, just about 6 months now, working on, interesting security problems, interesting technical problems, but also working to build something that's really important for the world.
Yeah, and I like what you said regarding really liking the problem, right? If you focus on the problem, I think that's key. So could you give us a brief introduction to Worldcoin, like an overview of what it is, what's its mission, what motivated its creation, and how does it aim to address some issues using blockchain technology?
Yeah, a few years back, about 4 or 5 years ago, Sam and Alex and a few others were talking about sort of the implications that AI was going to have on the world. And keep in mind that this is far enough back in history, which is not that long ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, where the conception that you and I have about what AI could do is very, very different. But they were already beginning to realize that not only were there these amazing positive things that were going to happen, right? Increased productivity, increased ability to interact on the internet, et cetera. But there was also some risks, right? There was the possibility that some people would be left out, that the digital economy was going to leave them behind and AI was going to take a prominent place. But there wouldn't be access provided. They were beginning to think about the implications of like deep fakes and the risks of falsification and fraud. And so we're trying to think through like what are the technologies that would be necessary to help protect humanity really in a world where AI was having that kind of impact. And so that was really the goal, was to identify technologies that would help improve trust and increase access to the global economy. And that's what Worldcoin has been focused on. That's what Tools for Humanity is doing, is helping to build those tools. So for me, I've seen sort of the impact of fraud, both personally, like I see spam in my inbox. I see efforts to try to solicit information from me in order to drive sort of some of those fraudulent types of business models. But I've also seen it professionally for almost 20 years of my career, right? How easy it is to trick people and how automation and software has made that more and more successful. And so it really resonated with me, the sort of mission of what are some of the key things that we need to build to make it possible to have humans be protected on the internet.
Yeah, and now that you said that about having been so much time in the security industry, what do you think is something like, what things have changed, but what things have remained like the same in security? Like I see some things that I started with security in 1999. Yeah. I was 14 years old, and I see some things like regarding to social engineering, for example, that keep on being exactly the same, right?
I think security is this interesting space where it's easy to see problems, and it's often very difficult to see solutions through. And so a lot of times we'll say something, talk about phishing, we'll say something like, well, if only people didn't fall for that. And you can't change human behavior. And so I think a lot of what we have to do as technologists is identify how we can change the underlying infrastructure to acknowledge the limits of humans and acknowledge the limits of our existing technology and build new technology to move past that. And so that's one of the things that's really exciting about Worldcoin as well, is like we're basically acknowledging that AI is going to get good enough that we need to have technical solutions that give us the ability to monitor AI, like to see when it's a real human that you're interacting with, because we can't tell anymore. Or we certainly won't be able to tell in the near future. And so those are sort of foundational things I think often get lost in the security space. We're very excited and don't build some of the core technologies.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other day I was talking with a fellow security researcher. Now there are like lots of new bots in Twitter that start interacting with your posts.
Yep.
But they send comments that are related to the post made with ChatGPT or whatever, and then they put the promoting a scam or spam or whatever. And there's sometimes when I read them that they say, "Is this a bot or is this a person?" Like, and I cannot guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to guess, but I'm not sure. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and that happens at scale every single day for sure.
Yeah, I agree. So now going to security challenges, right? What are the biggest security challenges you face as the Chief Security Officer at Tools for Humanity, especially concerning Worldcoin, right? And how do you prioritize those challenges, right? Because I mean, for sure, you have to be prioritizing all the time.
Yeah, we definitely have to do that. I think what's amazing to me about Tools for Humanity is that the things that we're doing are like they're really foundational. I often think back on the person that designed IP, like the Internet Protocol, or who designed the web browser. Right? Those first sort of moments that they created something that then unlocked lots and lots of potential. And we're doing that with the definition of proof of humanness, and recognizing that in order for that to work, you have to think about how it will be decentralized. How do we get to the point where it can be trusted, not just in San Francisco, not just in Buenos Aires, but like everywhere in the world? That's a hard problem. There are questions around biometric data, which is extraordinarily sensitive. People have concerns about it. Regulators have concerns about it, all for very good reasons. And so we have to think about how do we both use the sort of core element of humanness, which is the physicality of a person and the biometric information related to their physicality, to determine that they're human, but then also manage that in an extraordinarily careful way. We just had a blog post, I don't know when this is going to go live, but we just had a blog post in mid-May, about a week ago, that describes how we're using secure multi-party compute in a relatively new, very large-scale way to make it possible for our systems to be much more robust against risks at the back end of the systems where the data is being stored, right? So not only do you have to compromise one environment, but you have to compromise multiple environments. You don't have to trust any one of those environments exclusively, because if any one of them is behaving in a trustworthy way, then the data is going to be secure. Like, those are like very, very foundational things that we're working on in order to make the system be successful. So really excited to be working on those things. Oh, and I guess I should mention, like, I can be excited about those things, but we still have to do the basics, right? I'm still the CISO for a company that has a couple hundred employees and global offices. So we have to make sure that people reading their email have authenticated properly, that we're running anti-spam, that we're, all the blocking and tackling that every CISO in the world knows that they have to do. But I also get to do some of the exciting stuff. So that's fun.
Yeah, as we always say, the biggest risk is between the chair and the keyboard, right?
Yes. Yes.
So now going to identity verification, right? As you mentioned, Worldcoin uses biometric data for identity verification. How do you ensure the privacy and security of users' biometric data? That is what you said, the main concern from governments.
Yep.
So what measures are in place to prevent issues with this information?
Yeah, I think a key thing to keep in mind, because it's a great question, is that first and foremost, one of the things that we want to emphasize is our service is intended to provide privacy. It's intended to enhance privacy. So in that sense, most of what people think about as identity, we don't know it. We don't ask for it. We don't want to know it. It's not critical to the functioning of proof of humanity. What's critical is determining that it's a real human and that they're a unique human. And that gives a lot of the primitives that are necessary for our goal, which is helping protect humans in the age of AI. We don't need to know which human, we just need to know that it's a human. And the uniqueness is really important because so many of the risks associated with automation and AI are about creating lots of instances, right? The problem is not that there's a bot on your social network. The problem is that the social network's been overrun by millions of bots. And so that uniqueness, what's often called protection against Sybil attacks, is really, really important. So I just wanted to flag that at the beginning, is that what a lot of people think about is like know your customer or identity. That's not really what we're trying to provide. We're trying to provide privacy enhancing services to enhance protections in the age of AI. That said, we're still extraordinarily careful. There are all of the basic primitives that I think get used by someone trying to build a secure environment, right? We're using a cloud environment. We're encrypting all the data at rest. We have a privacy program where we're monitoring how data is connected. We're actively moving to make sure that biometric data is delinked from any other data. We've done a lot around, as I was mentioning earlier, trying to identify if there's a way to have that back-end infrastructure be less needing of trust by using secure multi-party compute. We can move it across multiple different environments. And if any one of them is trustworthy, then this entire system is trusted, which helps reduce the risk of compromise, makes it no longer an all or nothing in terms of how you protect that information. The other thing that we've done a lot on is making sure that the biometric information, the data that's necessary to determine that someone is human, is not connected to any of the actions that they take. So we use something called zero knowledge proofs. The zero knowledge proof effectively says that you are registered with our service and nothing else, so that you are proven to be human, having interacted with an orb. And then that can be used in the context of another application. But World ID and Worldcoin don't need to know and don't know what applications a user is going to be using. We use zero knowledge proofs to accomplish that. And so the basic idea there is the only thing you want to know is, are you registered? And the answer is yes, and no other information is communicated because of the zero knowledge proofs. And so that's a lot of the work that we do, is both minimize the amount of data that we have, make sure that where we have data, we've broken it across multiple different environments with SMPC, and then use ZKP to the zero knowledge proofs to make it more private, in short.
So, most of our listeners are security professionals, but if someone doesn't know what are zero knowledge proofs, how would you explain it in an easy way?
Yeah, I think the key thing to keep in mind is right now, and I'm not going to define a zero knowledge proof. I'll use it sort of as in an example. Right now, if you want to know whether someone is over age 18, the way that is determined is they hand you a document. That document has their name on it. It has their image on it. It has a statement from the government about what their age is. It probably has their home address on it. It has all of this other information. So zero knowledge proof is a way to take that information and realize the only thing that you want to be doing is proving that you're over the age of, in the United States, it's 21 to consume alcohol. In Argentina, it might be 18. And that's the only thing that you want to answer. And so what we've got is a set of math that makes it possible to only issue that one statement. This is a person over the age of 18. Or in our case, we use the math to issue a statement which is, this is a real human. They've registered with our service, and we don't provide any other information. And so we had to gather data. We had to gather information about their face, about their iris, about their biometric, in order to come to the conclusion that they're human. But when we are asked the question, the only answer that we give is yes, they're human.
I love that definition. That's very good. So regarding security and the storing of information, being transparent, what do you think is the role of open source in all this? And how was the challenge of open sourcing like most of your code and there are like 99% of Worldcoin code is open source, except on a small part? It would be also interesting to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. So I think most of my career, I've worked either in open source or adjacent to open source. There's this very interesting characteristic of the security space where most security people like to talk about the idea that being open is good, that being decentralized is good. But when push comes to shove, when things get complicated, they get nervous about having things be open. They get nervous about having multiple different parties and decentralization. And so then very quickly they say, let's close this because I don't understand all the risks that are associated with it being open. So one of the things that I really love about Worldcoin is we've made this commitment that we're going to try to make everything decentralized. We're going to try to make everything that we possibly can open. And in my mind, that's very powerful because what it means is we're confident enough in what we're building that we're willing to accept feedback from anybody in the world. If they like what we're doing, great. If they look at the source code and they see a problem, that's almost even better because they'll tell us about the problem and then we can go fix it. I feel the same way about what we call decentralization, where if we're able to create the system in a way that two different parties can each play a balanced role and it's still a trustworthy system, that's awesome. Because then you don't have to trust both of them. If either of them is trustworthy, you're in great shape. But it's very hard to build those kinds of systems. And so that's what we're constantly focused on. You mentioned that there's a small part of the orb that has not been open sourced. And that's true. What we've done with the orb, we've tried to open source as much of it as possible. Basically, our plan is to open source almost all of it. The one area that is challenging is around the models that are analyzing the video streams that are used to try to determine whether a person is a real person that's not trying to trick it. So there are things that we do with lights and with looking at the shape of the iris and looking at the shape of the eye and looking at a variety of different type of potential attacks that revealing how we're detecting someone trying to trick the orb is a little bit difficult. We would love to make it open. The risk is that if we do make it open, then it makes it easier for the attacker to work around those models. So what we've done is taken those models and put them into an isolated environment where they don't store anything, they don't have access to any other data other than things that are directly on the orb. And that's our approach to having it be something that can be trusted, even though we can't make it 100% open.
Okay, great. And now that we talked about open source and the risks of open source, right? Do you remember that like 1 month ago, approximately, was the XC backdoor that was found in a Linux distribution that was like worldwide distributed, and it was, if it wasn't for an analyst at Microsoft, it was very near to making it to lots of people worldwide and servers and everything, right? So I think that something interesting that you say is like people love saying, okay, we need decentralized system, we need everything to be open source and that, but what do you think about that case, for example, and what do you think that perhaps should change? If something should change, perhaps not, regarding open source repositories, or sometimes you have some open source library that is used by millions, but is programmed and updated by only one person, right? Or
Yep.
2 persons only. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would tease apart 2 different elements there. One is trying to think about open source as a way to provide visibility, transparency. So your specific example, that researcher who found that there was a problem was able to go look at the source code and actually figure out where the problem came from. So open source is amazing for that, right? It gives you that visibility. It allows more eyes to look at it. It allows for additional researchers to look at it. It makes it very hard to hide something in a way that closed source doesn't. There's a second question, which is, I think, where there is a challenge, even in the open source, that's no different in closed source, which is how do you validate the quality of the code, where quality is inclusive of not having bugs, but also includes, in this particular instance, someone actively trying to undermine the security of that library. And that's challenging, right? That's one of the core challenges that any CISO who is trying to build a secure development lifecycle has to think about. Like, where do you bring in third-party code? How do you ensure that the quality of the code that's being built by your own team meets expectations? What automation do you run to check for vulnerabilities, to check to make sure your libraries are up to date? Those are all things that every CISO has to think about, is how do you build all of those in, right? Is it ever okay for a single engineer to add code and not have it be code reviewed? That's a question that has to be thought about in the context of those repos. So I don't think that's unique to open source. What is unique to open source is the ability for somebody else to see those problems, raise them, and then quickly do an investigation. So that's why it's really attractive to me. And that's one of the reasons why Worldcoin is using it is encouraging it for all their products, and why Tools for Humanity is using it for as much of what we're building as we possibly can.
Excellent. You also talked a bit about decentralization, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we say that there's a thing between decentralization. Some people say decentralization versus security. Some people do not think it's a versus. So can you share any insights into, how do you balance the principles of decentralization with the needs of robust security measures in your Tools for Humanity infrastructure?
Yeah, I've heard people say decentralization and security are sort of in tension with one another. And I understand where that framing comes from. For me, decentralization is actually a way to test whether or not the security controls that have been built are good enough.
Okay.
I think in much the same way that transparency and open source are ways for you to evaluate and find issues. Decentralization is one of those ways, right? And so for me, I think you almost think about, you want to build enough security to get to the point where it could be decentralized and you would still have confidence that it's working. And so that's how I tend to think about it. Is it's almost like the phrase that gets used in English is it's a litmus test for whether or not you've built a system that's effective or not.
So what's the litmus test?
A litmus test it comes back to chemistry, and it's a particular type of test to see whether you have a result that's positive or negative. I don't know if it's a person's name. That's a good question, but it's just a way to know whether you have achieved your goal.
Very good. Didn't know about it. Here we learn lots of things. So now let's go to incident response, right? Can you share any insights into your incident response strategy? How prepared is Worldcoin to handle potential security breaches or cyber attacks?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I think incident response is always near and dear to every CISO. I've been involved in big incidents. I've been involved in little incidents, designing processes, etc. So it's always sort of top of mind. There are a few different things that I think you really have to have. One, you have to have good visibility, right? You have to understand where those incidents might happen. You have to have monitoring in place. You have to have an understanding of what it looks like when an incident is happening, and some clarity on what it even means to have an incident, right? Is a vulnerability that's not exploited, is that an incident? Or is it just a vulnerability? Those kinds of things are really, really important. You have to have good communication. The biggest problem that people run into when there's an incident that's happening is who needs to be in the room, how quickly can they make a determination about what needs to happen, and then how are you going to drive it to resolution, right? Because you're taking what could be weeks or months worth of decision making, and you're trying to cram it down into like minutes to be able to move as quickly as possible, make a decision as quickly as possible. So who controls the calendar, who controls the schedule, who controls making decisions is all very, very important. And you have to have good relationships with the people that are in the room so that you can do those things as quickly as possible. So communication is key. Ownership to be able to drive those things is another thing that's really, really important. So which party is expected to do what thing by when? And then ultimately, I think there's nothing like practice. And so even if you're not having incidents, and I've been fortunate, knock on wood is the expression. Like I've been fortunate that at Worldcoin and Tools for Humanity, in the time that I've been here, we haven't had any big incidents, but it's something that we're still thinking about. We're still practicing. What would an incident look like? What is the monitoring that we would need to have in place? Who would we need to communicate with to be able to respond as quickly as possible? Even last night, I was asking, hey, in our SMPC environment, how would we respond if there were one of them that was compromised? How quickly can we see it? What are we going to do? Who needs to be involved? And how do we make sure that even if that happens, it has no impact on the overall system? So that's a lot of what you have to do, is be proactive about practicing how you're going to deal with it. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what an incident would look like and how we would respond to it.
Do you think that there's like a number or a maximum number of people that should be part of a war room, for example, or there's some like generic advice regarding war rooms that you will advise, or it's different for each kind of company and also for each kind of incident?
That's a great question. I'm sure it's different for every company and for every incident. I think once you get above 10-ish people, then you have to start asking, are these people that are in the room actually, and I don't want this to sound bad, but like, are they actually doing anything? So everybody that's there should be responsible for some action that's going to be taken, because that's what you really want, is that level of involvement. But I've seen around 10 to 15 is what you usually end up having, because you end up with legal, with policy, with PR, with the engineering team. There's probably some documentation element that needs to happen. You probably have security or privacy folks that are going to be in the room, but then you also have if it's an engineering incident, the engineering team that's most knowledgeable. So I think very, very quickly you end up at 10 or 15 people. Much beyond that, then it starts to get a little bit unwieldy. But the most important thing is knowing who needs to take what action and by when, and having somebody that's able to hold as much of that in their head as possible. Get it down on paper, but hold it in their head to be able to make sure that all of the things are moving forward in a reasonable way.
Okay, perfect. Now let's talk a bit about community, right?
Yeah.
How important is community collaboration in enhancing Worldcoin's security? And you talked a bit about that when we talked about open source. And Are there any initiatives or programs to engage with security researchers and the broader blockchain community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of openness, as I mentioned earlier. I think community is part of that, right? You want to have people. It's not enough to make this source code open if there's nobody that's going to look at it. And so you want to do everything that you can to encourage people to look at it, and then also give feedback, not just on your source code, but on your overall practices and how it is that you're building out the environment. So specific to security, we've already mentioned we use open source. Try to make as much available as possible. We have a bug bounty program, very active. Lots of contributors from around the world that are finding issues, letting us know about them, and engaging in conversation about those issues. We sponsor some events. So there's an event that's coming up later this year in Argentina called Eco Party that we're thinking about sponsoring. And have enjoyed interacting with the folks from Faraday, who are sort of critical to the success of that event. There are other events that we're doing. There's one that's going on this weekend in Germany that we're sponsoring. So some of it is like formal sponsorship. Some of it is just encouraging people to take a look at the orb or take a look at other parts of our business and give feedback on it. We have third-party audits. So I don't know if that's really community, but it's definitely a place where we're engaging with security researchers. One thing that I've been pushing for that I think is actually unique is trying to make sure that we have auditors from around the world that have looked at our stuff. I was a security consultant for a number of years, but I was always in the United States, and the companies that I worked for were in the United States. But Worldcoin is being used around the world. And so we're talking with auditors that are based in Korea. We're talking with auditors that are based in Argentina, trying to make Japan, Germany, the United States, all of these different places, trying to make sure that the security folks in those areas have had an opportunity, but also, we're doing things that are sufficiently interesting in terms of hardware security and some of the crypto things that we're doing that there's a lot of excitement about being able to engage and interact. So it turns out that audits are a way that we're helping to do community, which is pretty neat. But and if you have ideas, Pablo, anything that you can think of, I'm a fan of trying to have as many people engaged as possible.
Yeah, I know. And I really like what you said regarding like if you open source the code but nobody's looking at it, it's
right. It's like did a tree fall in the forest? I'm not sure.
yeah, totally. So what cutting edge technologies or innovations is Worldcoin leveraging to enhance its security postures? And there are any upcoming features or improvements that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mentioned a few already. We're using ZKP. ZKP
Zero knowledge proofs.
Zero knowledge proofs. It's been really fascinating for me. I grew up. My early security engagements were around, public key cryptography. Elliptic curves were kind of novel when I started learning about public key cryptography. And so I started reading about zero knowledge proofs and trying to understand the math. And I can't understand the math, like I gave up. But even sort of thinking through the implications of how you design these circuits and how they work for our particular environment, can they be applied to add confidence to some of the machine learning that's being done, some of the analysis that's being done? That's an area that we're actively investigating. So there's a lot of work in the zero knowledge proof space that we're either using or trying to figure out if we can apply it to our world. I mentioned secure multi-party compute earlier. That was very, very interesting. Remco, who's from the Worldcoin Foundation, did a really nice talk. He's done several of them, but there's a blog post that we did about a week ago that talks about how we're using SMPC and how a lot of the innovation that was happening as SMPC wasn't in the security space exactly. It was actually coming from math that was being used in AI and some other areas, but is applicable to what we were trying to do. So SMPC is an area that we definitely have done it. Self-custody is something that I think is pretty novel. Our belief is data about a person is really something that should be held by that person. So in the World ID system, they hold their private key, but they also hold information that the orb sort of captured during the verification process, images and things like that, and they're given to them. That's not really how most people design systems. Most people design large-scale systems by having a big back end that holds all the data. But so thinking through the security model that is appropriate and most effective in an environment that favors self-custody is super interesting. And we've been doing a lot of work on that. And then decentralization, sort of you and I have already talked about that a bit, right? Like, how do you build this in such a way that there could be lots of different manufacturers for orbs. There could be lots of different applications that are connected to the World ID system. And what parts can be decentralized and how. And so thinking those things through from a security perspective is going to require lots of innovation.
So self-custody is also a big challenge because imagine if we see nowadays people losing their keys daily. If we think about identity and my identity being linked to one address and I lose that, so how do we have some kind of equilibrium with self-custody and saying, okay, you are responsible for your data, you have to store it, but we know that users will eventually lose it. So, I mean, for example, in Ethereum and the EVM, now we have account abstraction that is growing a lot. So what do you think are the main challenges there? Have you seen any technologies that you are interested in, like social recovery or some kind of systems that allow to be able to custody the data, but to have availability, basically, right? Not only confidentiality.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's the kind of thing, what do I mean by it? Dealing with the reality that humans make mistakes and they lose stuff has been a challenge for cryptographic systems forever. You have this key and it's private. Okay. Nobody can have a copy of it. Okay. Where is it? Oh, I can't find my phone. And so almost immediately when you get a system of more than, say, 5 people engaged in cryptography, you have to begin thinking about how you do recovery, how you do backups, and those end up being really, really complicated systems. So I think we have a very clean approach right now that involves a user being able to issue a backup and then having that backup be encrypted and protected. And that backup is being kept in a different system. It could be in their Apple ID account, or it could be in their Google Play account, depending on what type of device they're using. But even that, I think at large scale, we're going to have to start thinking through more sophisticated ways to provide protection for that information, but also to provide recovery for it.
Good. We also talked a bit about Worldcoin objective with AI and fraud, but I would like to go a bit deeper, right? So as we said, with the rise of AI being used for fraud, that we are seeing it more and more daily. In fact, 1 week ago, I think it was, that the CEO of a very, very big company was impersonated with a video that it was supposedly sent by him to his secretary, and they made a transaction of, I don't know if it was $2 or $3 million.
I think it was 25, but It was a big number.
Okay, yeah, 25. It was that one. Yeah. Something with it too. So how is Worldcoin tackling this issue, and what measures are in place? I mean, in one part, you need to have measures to prevent AI-driven fraud when someone is being onboarded with the orbs. And then how will World ID be used to tackle this issue, right? Because what I usually see is some people that do not understand quite well how Worldcoin works, that say, oh no, this is a problem for privacy. And they say, no. They're trying to fix the problems that we have with privacy nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not so easy to explain it.
I think that's exactly right. Our business is to build what I think of as like underlying infrastructure to prepare humanity for dealing with the world where there is AI. And in that sense, like, how do you deal with this fraud is like exactly the thing that we think about every day. And when we see a headline, because there have been those headlines, exactly like the one that you described, right, where a sophisticated deepfake was produced, a human interacted with that deepfake, the human is empowered to make a very big business decision, transfer a lot of money, but they can't tell that they're being influenced by a deepfake. That's exactly the scenario that we're concerned about. And so what we've provided is this base piece of infrastructure that can be connected into any application to tell you, is the thing that I'm interacting with a human? Or is it not? And if it's a human that you're interacting with on a regular basis, you can tell, is it one that I've interacted with in the past? There's those elements exist. Now, does World ID immediately fix the video deepfake problem in the context of your favorite, web collaboration platform? No. But it's infrastructure that those web collaboration platforms simply don't have right now and cannot produce to do the solution at scale. And so what we're doing is producing the infrastructure and then thinking about how to make it private enough, which in our case is perfectly private in terms of zero knowledge proof, no information other than the fact that this is a human and that it's a unique human is going to be communicated. That platform that provides web conferencing could include that information and take advantage of it and use it. Because so far, any other approach that begins to provide the level of protection that's necessary becomes very, very privacy invasive. Right? I don't want to have to share my passport in order to use video conferencing. I don't want to have to give my home address in order to do video conferencing. I just want to know that the person I'm interacting with is the same person that I interacted with yesterday. And that's the thing that's missing. And so what we're trying to do is provide that underlying capability that then can be incorporated into a lot of different use cases. And the privacy element is critical in order for it to be usable in those use cases.
Yeah, now that you say that regarding KYCs, I always think when you do a KYC and you put like your photograph like this with your passport, and that I have done this like 30 or 40 times.
Mm-hmm.
These photographs will eventually appear online and in the dark web, right? So that's useless.
I was just reading an article yesterday, actually, about a wallet, basically the back end for a wallet application where they had 5 or 6 million of those pictures that ended up being exposed. So, yep.
No, that's in fact, some weeks ago, I don't know if it's the same case. There was a case with a wallet or an exchange that started sending users some information for them to confirm, but they mixed it. So they were sending you my KYC information and like that. And
it's just an entry in a database.
It's terrible. Okay. And the other thing that I liked is that, from the privacy perspective, you are building like the rails, and now lots of people can start like, I don't know if it's the rails, but the infrastructure, so that now lots of people and application and devs can start using that in their platforms to make them more secure, right?
Yeah, that's the intention, is to have it be easy for any application to gain proof of humanity and then use it in the context of their application, and do it in a way that doesn't invade the user's privacy and also doesn't connect across applications or connect the infrastructure to the specific apps either. So that's the goal.
Very good. Now, as you perhaps you know, I was involved for many years in education. I founded a blockchain and cybersecurity academy in Latin America. So what efforts are being made to educate users about security best practices and the safe use of Worldcoin, right? And how do you address common misconceptions or security concerns from users? And what are those most common concerns or misconceptions?
I mean, I think one of the most common concerns is that for many of our users, this is the first time they're using crypto. This is perhaps the first time, for some instances, it might be the first time that they've had a real wallet, anything other than cash. Or even it might be the first time they've ever had anything that's similar to a banking transaction, right? Where there's something, again, other than cash that's in their hand. And so helping users have that basic understanding of what is the service that I'm interacting with, what are its capabilities, what are its benefits. Should I, give my wallet to another party? Like it would never occur to them to hand money to someone that they don't trust, but they may be more comfortable with handing their phone. So there's some like basic, what is this thing, sort of level of communication that's necessary, given the broad range of different types of users that Worldcoin has attracted and is interesting to. So we have in-app educational campaigns to try to provide that kind of information, to give them context about what it is that the project is doing, what we're trying to provide. There's things like at the locations where people are interacting with Worldcoin, such as where they go to an orb to get verified. We have signage that describes some of the use cases, but some of the things that they should be thinking about from a privacy standpoint. And so having that information available and trying to make it in as many places as possible. The operators that are there have information that they can help answer those kinds of questions as well. And then we do try to do outreach. This is an example, I think, of that kind of outreach. Try to provide information in whatever forum is most effective, so people can understand what it is that we're doing and think about some of those best practices. As you mentioned earlier, the security space has this notion of the thing that's between. The problem is often the person sitting between the monitor and the keyboard, and that's also the only reason we have these systems is for the humans. So I don't think we can quite make them go away, but we can definitely make sure that to the extent possible, we give them all the information so that they can make good decisions.
Yeah, and I think that something very interesting that you said, and I hadn't thought about, is that you are like onboarding millions of users into crypto and blockchain, right? So, for example, in every country, there's something similar onboarding into blockchain technology. For example, Latin America, it used to be like stable coins because of the issues we have with local currencies. Perhaps France is NFTs, United States this and that. But I think that it's a big challenge to onboard new users, but I think it's very interesting to think that that's also their first wallet. So that's a really nice piece of work that you're doing there.
Yeah, our goal is to get to everybody. I think there are very few efforts that have ever been made that are trying to reach all of humanity, right? If you go back to like the 50s, we tried to solve smallpox. That was a campaign across the entire world. Some of the things around clean water that like the Gates Foundation has pursued. There are definitely efforts that have been at a global scale, but there aren't a lot of them. And figuring out how to allow all of humanity to join the internet, do that in a safe way, participate in the benefits that come from AI while being protected from is definitely one of the most exciting things that we're doing.
Yeah, totally. And I also like about the app that you have your tokens, but you're also allowed to, hey, do you want to swap for Bitcoin or for Ethereum? So as soon as the person starts using the app, already starts like, oh, okay, what's Bitcoin? What's Ethereum? And there starts like the the path. Like Alicia would say, the rabbit hole, the crypto rabbit hole. So I have 3 more questions. How is a typical day for you as a Chief Information Security Officer, right? How does it look like? Can you walk us through your daily responsibilities and tasks?
Sure. Let's see. I get up around 6 o'clock.
6
US,
o'clock, okay.
6 a.m. Unless it's a day where I'm struggling to sleep, then maybe 4:30 or 5 to go to the gym in the morning. But usually 6:30. We have a lot of people that are in Europe. I'm in San Francisco, California, in the United States. Because we have people that are in Europe, they've been working for like half the day by the time I wake up. So I get up at 6, have about half an hour where I go through email and Slack and just like get to a point where I understand what's happened so far. I have 2 kids, so 6:30 or so, I work to get them out of bed. That usually takes longer than it should. We have breakfast. I walk with them to the school bus. It's just a couple blocks from my house here, so that part of my day is very normal and very regimented. After that, I have no idea what's going to happen on any given day. Like week by week, I have a pretty good sense for what I would do. We have an operational review every week within the security organization where we go over like what are the major metrics that we're tracking, what percentage of our devices are currently properly managed, what number of devices are we burning down, all those kinds of sort of classic security metrics. We talk through any incidents that might have happened, any areas for improvement, those kinds of changes. So we have one operational review a week. Separately, we're not just reactive all the time. A lot of what we're doing is building new things. And so we have project reviews at least once a week. What is it that we're building? How are we progressing? Are there new gaps that have been identified where we'll need to build something? So that happens on a weekly basis. That's within the security team. And then we have a similar thing with engineering organization with our broader company. So I have a couple different reviews that I sit in to try to understand what's going on across the company. What else do I spend a lot of my time on? I spend a lot of time right now interviewing. We're hiring engineers and things like that for Worldcoin and for Tools for Humanity. The security team is looking for a number of good people. So I talk to like 4 or 5 people a week probably. So that takes a bunch of time. A lot of design discussions. If we're going to use SMPC, what are the different types of parties that need to be providing that backend? What are the risks associated with it? How do we ship this new feature? A lot of time spent on that. And then I also spend a fair amount of time, probably another 3 or 4 hours a week at least, talking with external parties, talking about what it is that we're doing on the project, considering, if it would be helpful for them to engage in a way. Could be talking with a developer that's thinking about, how would they incorporate proof of humanity into their flow? What would that look like? And so I get involved in some of that sort of brainstorming, but also helping them to understand how it would be helpful for them. So that's roughly what I do on a weekly basis. But any given day, I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. So it can be.
So you said that you spend lots of time like interviewing people and managing people.
Yeah.
So what do you think for a chief information officer?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you make an equilibrium between having very good hard skills and soft skills, right? This is a very, very typical thing regarding, for example, you have to hire a CTO, right?
Yeah.
And you have those CTOs that are very, very technical, like hardcore, but don't know how to talk to people. So then they fail, right? Because as a CTO, you have to manage a team. So what do you think about that for C-level positions?
I mean, I think every organization is different. A lot of the strength that I've had, like the reason that I've been, I think, reasonably successful, is that I have some ability to get into the technical. I'm very good at what lawyers call issue spotting, which is somebody can describe a system and I can quickly say, what about this? What about that? Have you considered this? And those kinds of questions are really helpful for guiding someone and for helping them think through a problem. And that can be very, very technical. And I'm happy to go into bytecode or crypto design or whatever it is that's most relevant. But ultimately, that's helping someone else to think through the problem and think through what the solution is going to look like. I think the best executives, the best leaders are ones that are able to do that, right? It's not so much that they know the answer, it's that they're able to create an environment where the people around them are able to come up with the answer. Now you have to know enough to be able to do that. But you don't have to know everything, and you don't have to expect to know everything. So those are the people that I've seen be most successful. In my time at Google, in my time at Atlassian, all of these companies that have really strong innovation cultures. And so that's what I try to do. Is just create an environment where the people on my team can sort of be the owner of a problem and try to be driving for it, and I'm there to help them be successful.
And regarding your week, like, how do you find a place or a moment to like read or learn? Are you a book person? Do you listen to podcasts, audiobooks? Like, how do you manage that?
It's changed over time. There was a little while when I first joined where I was walking to work. And so podcasts while I walked to work was about an hour. I could do one good podcast during that hour. So that worked really, really well. At the moment, my bus ride is about 20 minutes. I moved a little further away from the office. So now my commute is both shorter, but it has to be by transit. So now I haven't been doing that. I usually use that as a chance to look at Slack and clean up messages and things like that. I read at night. I didn't include that. My kids go to bed around 9 o'clock, so I have some time there before I pass out, where I can read and get caught up on things. And then the Tools for Humanity team is like very academic. We have probably more than our fair share of PhDs and mathematicians and things like that. So there's a constant flow of, hey, go read this thing. And I can usually read all the words. I get a little confused sometimes in all the math symbols. But there's a lot of academic discussion and a lot of surfacing of papers that have been published and things like that. So there's a good opportunity there as well.
Yeah, the other day I was like thinking the same. I said, "Oh, I am not reading as many books as I used to."
Yeah.
But then I realized how many papers and documentations and videos and I read that it's a different way of consuming information, right?
The other time that I end up reading books is on planes. So like when I was down in Argentina, that's 14, 15 hours to get there. That's almost a whole book.
Yeah, totally.
So definitely that's been happening perhaps more than I would like. Actually, I've been reading books on planes recently.
Nice. Books on a plane. That's good. So, what do you think about the future of blockchain security? Changing a bit the subject, right? What does the future hold for blockchain security? Are there any emerging trends or threats that you believe the industry should be aware of?
I often, when I think about something like blockchain, I think about it in the context of like, what are all of the other technologies that are out there? And I was never a doubter that the idea of a blockchain was important. Like the idea of a transparent, auditable record of events that have taken place. Like that's a core security primitive, right? Anytime you ask, like, where's the audit log associated with this application, or how do we know what it is that happened? Like that, in my mind, is like a primitive that's so foundational. And so I think the technology is great in that regard. It's interesting to me how we've so tightly coupled blockchain and financial transactions, right? In my mind, that coupling doesn't need to be the case. Like I'm much more interested in blockchain as a security primitive that applies to how we build other technology stacks. And that's where like Ethereum and smart contracts begins to expand beyond the financial component to it. I would say in the financial space especially, thinking through how you can have some privacy is really, really important. And unfortunately, most of what we've seen so far is like either it's all private or it's not private. And that is not how the world works, right? The way the world works outside of the blockchain world, there's like cash transactions that are basically private. And then there are these other transactions that are bigger, that are necessarily not private. And so I think that's going to be one of the big challenges, at least in the financial element of blockchain, is how do we have some things be private, but not immediately stumble into the money laundering problem. And I don't think we have a good solution there yet. I'm intrigued about whether proof of humanity and a private proof of humanity like Worldcoin and Tools for Humanity have been working on will help, because I think that primitive of like, this is a unique person and then sort of limiting how much transaction they can do could be really, really powerful in that space. But, I think time will tell. So I think that, how do we have transparency and auditability, take advantage of that, but then also think about weaving privacy into it, I think is a key thing for the future, for blockchain especially.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I have one more and last question.
Okay.
So can you share something that you believe about security that most people would disagree with? What experiences or insights have shaped that belief?
Yeah. I think a lot of people constantly think that security is in tension with other things that they value. That you have to be secure or have high performance, that you have to be secure or be, actually we had this example earlier, be decentralized. That things that are more secure are like fundamentally less usable. Good design can't be secure design. And what's interesting to me is that throughout my whole career, I've sort of seen the world differently. The metaphor that I often think about is, when you're walking around a neighborhood and you see bars on the windows, does that make you more secure or less secure? For the most part, that's an indication that you're in an area that's less secure. And when you're in a beautiful neighborhood, you're probably in a neighborhood that you're more secure. And that's sort of the way that I think about the world, is that all of the security artifice, all of the focus on security is usually an indication that you have a problem, not an indication that you're doing it really well. And when I think about the best security solutions that have been implemented over my career, like the web browser is so much more secure than a world that we used to be in, where you had to install an application constantly in order to do anything. It's just better. Mobile did the same thing, where it took literally, like I was involved in the discussions, it took the web browser security model and said, let's do the same thing for full-fledged applications. Let's sandbox them. Let's limit their ability to have access. Let's make it easy for them to be uninstalled. Like, we made a list of all of the things that were bad about applications on desktop computers, and we said, let's not do any of those things. And then we said, what are all the good things about web? And we did all those things. And so it was security technology that unlocked use cases that were amazing, right? Like the one I always, like, you now are willing to get in somebody's car and they drive you around. Like, how much trust did you have to have in that person, in the system that's behind that person? That's like a ton of security that unlocks that use case, but it's spectacular. And so I think often we lose sight of that. We lose sight of the fact that good security is clean and simple and happens in the background. And the way that you know that it's happening is that all of those other things that you think it's in tension with, it's not in tension with them. So that's pretty controversial, but it comes up all the time. And almost invariably, if somebody says, well, we have to trade off this against security, I think the answer is no, go back to the drawing board, because there must be some way that we can do this that both helps developer productivity and security, or both helps user usability and security. So that's my view anyway.
I like this idea about walking in the neighborhood and seeing the houses with the bars or not, and say, is that house more secure than... I really like that. I like that example. So, Adrian, well, we have been like more than an hour. I have learned a lot of things. We talked about a lot of things. Is there anything else that we that perhaps you would like to say or to add that perhaps we didn't talk about?
I really enjoyed having the chance to talk with you. I think it's exciting, the types of stuff that we're working on at Tools for Humanity. I think the problems that you and I discuss around how do you have security and decentralization, how do you have trust in a system that's distributed on the world, all of those are really, really interesting technical challenges. And they are the things that we will have to overcome in order to build technology that will help us as AI becomes more and more capable. So just excited to have the opportunity to talk with you and to share a little bit about that and think through some of these things with you. So thank you very much for having me, Pablo.
Thank you for making the time to be here. Thank you everyone for listening. This has been the episode number 10 of the Blockchain Security Series with Adrian Ludwig, Chief Information Security Officer at Tools for Humanity. So thank you everyone and see you next time. Thank you, Adrian. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Thanks. Bye.
Blockchain Security Series, the podcast where the future of Web3 security unfolds. Presented by pablito.eth.